All right, we'll officially call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. and we'll start with roll call from starting to my right.
Hi, I'm Patrick Keogh. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Oh, Cheryl Picard, and it's nice to see everybody on a nice night.
Patty McQueen, thank you for coming out tonight.
Hello, everyone. Josh Patterson, Plymouth Junior, and Student Voice and Action Co-Chair.
Josh is excited about that junior. Congratulations, Dr. Merritt.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to begin by introducing my assistant, Ms. Diane Robertson. We want to thank her for being here to take our minutes and keep us on track so the community can capture everything that happens during this time period. We also like to introduce and thank Ms. Carly Reyes, our Assistant Director of Communication and Marketing. She keeps us on track with our technology needs and our communication needs for the greater community.
Thank you, Dr. Merritt. Kurt Tiskowitz, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services. Welcome.
Good evening. Jill Minnick, Chief Finance and Operations Officer. Welcome. Good to see you.
Good evening. Beth Rail, Chief Academic and Innovation Officer. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good evening. Abdul Ayoub, Chief Human Resources Officer.
Welcome, Liz Vartania Gibbs, Assistant Superintendent, Student and Family Engagement.
I almost said Dr. Patterson. Mr. Patterson, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up is action item 240684, adoption of agenda, approval of consent agenda.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda and an action item, adopt and approve the consent agenda, and action item 240684.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Dr. Merritt, will you walk us through?
Oh, I'd like to pull something off of that.
Yep, as soon as she walks through.
Oh, yes, you walked. Okay.
This evening, the consent agenda consists of human resources transactions. Since our last time together, we applaud the Human Resources Department. They've been busy hiring champions, so we're ready for the start of the school year. We also have some leaves and resignations, as well as retirements for your consideration. We have the approval of minutes from the following meetings: on our regular meeting, June 11th, as well as our special meeting on June the 13th. We have final readings of the following policies: Policy 2340, field trips and overnight travel; Policy 2370.01, that is online blended learning. We also have the following action items this evening as a part of the consent agenda. We have the cooperative agreement between Wayne Westland Community School District and P-CCS. This is for the 24-25 school year. This allows our students to get courses through the Wayne Westland Community School District. We also have the consideration of approval for the cooperative agreement with Livonia for our special education transition program for the 24-25 school year. As you recall, these are annual agreements that we seek approval from both boards each year. We have the consideration of approval for a tentative agreement with the Plymouth Canton Cafeteria Association. We have a consideration of approval for a tentative agreement with the Plymouth Canton Paraprofessional Association, the approval of a tentative agreement with the Plymouth Canton Licensed Technician, and the consideration to approve a tentative agreement for the Plymouth Congress of Administrators. And as we know, these tentative agreements have all successfully been ratified by the individual units.
All right, are there any board members who would like any items removed from the consent agenda for further conversation?
Yeah, I would like to have Policy 2340, field trips and overnight travel.
All right, so I believe we'll go ahead and remove that from the agenda. We'll vote on the consent agenda without that item in there, and then we'll take up that conversation immediately after we vote. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
No, I just had one question too. For the tentative things, do we vote again when it's not when it's final?
So your vote tonight makes it final.
Oh,
So it's already
gotcha.
been approved
Okay.
by the unions, and now yours is the final
All right,
vote.
thank you.
And then it becomes the collective
Thank you,
bargaining
sorry.
agreement.
Okay.
And I just wanted to thank the administration and all the bargaining units for their creativity and equity that they brought to these agreements, especially the work that's done on the PCPA and in trying to address some of the things that we're doing with our paras. So thank you so much for that agreement.
All right, all in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed say no. All right, passes 7-0.
Four.
Oh, 4-0. Missing half the squad. Passes 4-0. All right, I'll give you the floor.
Oh, for that, okay,
Yeah.
so I had, question on the, on that particular policy, and not so much how it's worded or anything, I mean, I'm fine with that policy, but but directly related to that, whether we have a policy for overnight, deciding, I did ask, deciding, like, how do we decide where the sleeping arrangements for students, and because we do have the transgender and gender nonconforming student policy that says that, discrimination and all that, or that the policy covers conduct that takes place in the school, on school property, at school-sponsored functions and activities. That would be a school function, an activity, an overnight field trip. So I was curious if we need to have some kind of a policy or something, because as you want to honor those students' rights, we also need to honor the students' rights that do not feel comfortable with a male. If a female doesn't want a male in her body, or vice versa, opposite body parts, if we want to get specific, that they would not be comfortable with that in a sleeping arrangement. I think that needs to be looked at, because there has been a case already in Colorado of a student, 11-year-old, who was set up with a male, considering her was a male student, and they found that out after she was already in the room and did not feel comfortable being in that room with somebody of what she considered the opposite sex, which was the opposite sex. So I don't know if there's a way, because in this policy we say that we're going to keep privacy. So if it's a private thing, would a student know ahead of time that this student was going to be with them in a sleeping arrangement? And so that is my concern. Like, how do we make sure that doesn't happen for people, because there's a lot of different cultures and beliefs that would not be comfortable with that.
So to address the question, for our policy, it does not address the sleeping arrangements. That is something that is a practice that takes place at the building level. So when you look at assignments for for field trips, that's something that is done at the building level with parental permission. And so a student would not have sleeping arrangements in any situation without parental consent going into that.
But a parent, if you go by our policy though, this is private, so like, if a student is a transgender student, and they didn't want anybody to know, they didn't want their parents to know, only a certain teacher might know, and that teacher doesn't have to reveal that privacy, then how would that information be known until the student was already with that student? So I mean, like how would that parent know? If it's already private from the student's own parents, how would a parent of another student even have that information, or this other student, to know that that's who they've been placed with?
So again, the policy itself does not address arrangements for sleeping. So I think so a separate question may be, is that a separate discussion that we would need to have separate from this piece? But or is that an administrative guideline? But currently, any information, in terms of privacy that would be known from us is not, that's something that we as school, we couldn't communicate any information. So I think when you look at arrangements with family, you're typically in a field trip assignment, you're going to be with your friends, your students are choosing, they have the right to choose an individual room, they don't have to room. So those are decisions that are made with all families involved in terms of that process.
All right. That's why I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't something that needed to be included in this policy, or a separate policy, or just to prevent another lawsuit kind of thing. So, all right.
So at this point then, can we move for a vote on this thing, or we do it at the end of the agenda?
I believe we do it now, don't we, Diane?
Do it either way now or at the end with the action item, the other action item.
Usually they're moved to the end when we get prior notice. So either way is fine.
You can go ahead and knock it out.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you an action item number if you're going to vote it in now. President Wilson, the action item number will be 240688.
All right. Motion?
President Wilson, I move that we approve policy number 2340-field trips and overnight travel. This will be a first and final reading. The action item is 240688.
Is there a second?
Second it.
I said first and final.
Oh, fine.
It's that first and final.
Pardon?
It's that first and final.
Oh, it isn't first,
Because
it's
we
just
already
final.
did
Okay, I'm sorry.
first.
Mhm.
This is a final reading. Sorry, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Is there a second?
A second.
All right, Member Picard seconded. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed say no. Passes 4-0. Now turn it over to Mr. Maydoun for leaves, resignations, and retirements. New hires as well.
So let's start, we have several retirements that we want to acknowledge. Dana Ernberger, who has been an employee with the district since 1995. Jennifer Hawk, who has been an employee with the district since 1994. Virginia Jeffries, who has been at Discovery since 2010. Dana Jones, who's been Director of Early Childhood Education since 2000. Darren Sylvester, who was a political science teacher at Salem, who's been with the district since 1996. And Michelle West, who's been at Bentley and is an employee at the district since 1994. We wish them well in their future endeavors. In addition, we have several of our new hires that are here tonight. First we'll start with Megan Chanko, who was hired as a resource room teacher at East. So we check to come forward.
It's nice to meet you all. Thank you. I'm very excited.
Welcome.
We're excited to have you.
Next is Carrie Conat. She's also a resource room teacher at Plymouth, so welcome to her.
I just want to say how thrilled I am to be part of Plymouth Canton Schools. Thank you.
Faith Ivy, who's hired as a social worker at Canton.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to serve.
Welcome.
Jason Bulka, computer science teacher at Canton. I've known him for a lot. I was surprised when he came here because I knew him from Van Buren. So when I was a principal.
I just want to say I'm very excited. The staff at Canton that I've met so far has been very helpful and very excited as well. So thank you very much.
She was the last one there. Is Christian Jones here? He's a math teacher at Salem.
Thank you for that chocolate.
And that's all we have for today.
Fantastic, thank you.
Also, just an acknowledgement for you and your team, as well as all of our unions, for successfully working together. We go through the IBB process here in our district, and although sometimes it adds time to the negotiation process, it really allows us to determine what are shared interests. We know as a district it is important to compensate our staff fairly, and we want to actually be leaders in that space, and we have to balance that with the demands and budget, and as we look forward with the cliff. So just making sure that we can continue to work together, and I just appreciate that from both sides that you're able to come to so many agreements. You came in February, I believe, and we had March, and we had 8 contracts, and I think at this point you have worked with your team to successfully bring across 5. So thank you, and thank all of our union leadership for representing your various memberships and moving our district forward together.
All right, on to celebrating success with Member McCoyne.
This evening, the Board of Education will once again celebrate our school community with a VIP award to an amazing and generous volunteer for the Canton High School Football Booster Club, Mark Smith. Mark serves as the president of the Football Booster Club.
Served, but.
Oh, served, okay.
I'll always serve.
That's a full-time job. Even though his son already graduated, he still manages the club, announces games, keeps score at all 3 levels. Mark welcomes suggestions for improving Booster Club programs, actively seeks funding for much-needed upgrades, attends every home and away varsity football game, and when he's not announcing or scoring, helps maintain headsets and equipment. He has also served on the football interview committee, a process that took several months. He looks for ways to acquire capital for facility improvements and assists at all team events, including pre-game dinners. Again, another full-time job right there. Mark is a kind, genuine, and caring individual. While most of his assistance has been with the football program, he cares deeply about Canton and the entire park community, freely giving his time to make a difference. I would like to invite Kristen Farkas, the assistant principal for activities and athletics for Canton High School, to say a few words.
I think those were my words, actually. And I just, it was important to honor Mark because he did go above and beyond. It was more than just being the Booster Club president. We were transitioning from not having a coach to having a coach, and he looked at me and said, we're gonna take care of this together. Everything will be okay. And like she said, it was the announcing, scoring, equipment, headsets, uniforms, everything. He spent countless hours on the phone in my office, helping me organize everything for a football season that didn't quite end the way we'd hoped, but he did it even after his son made the choice to not play as well, and to me that made it above and beyond, that he went that extra mile when Canton needed him the most. So thank you, Mark.
Board of Education, I am awarding you the Volunteer in Public Schools Award. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure. So my wife and son said to keep it short. I said I got it down to 43 minutes, but seriously, I don't even really know what to say, which is pretty rare for me. Really honored. Kristen has been incredible, and my goal was just to try and support whatever was going on. When I got the email inviting me here tonight, I almost hit delete because I saw VIP, and I'm not even a VIP in my own house. So, but I said, okay, that's fine. I mean, you know, I can take a picture of that up there because that's really what it is. I've worked with young people my entire career at different platforms, just to try and help them get to that next level. It's been an interesting and exciting last couple years. I'll continue to be around, and hopefully, you know, that will continue. So I told Kristen, and even though sometimes my wife shakes her head, I said, look, still, whatever you need, I'll be around, and we'll continue that. I love the area, I love the school community, and, you know, more important, I love the kids. So thank you very much, I appreciate it.
And your family also.
Congratulations again. Thank you. All right, so we're going to actually work backwards to give Patty some time to do the photo op, and we'll start with the Student Voice in Action Committee.
Caught me off guard. So as of now, we do not have any meetings planned, but it will be sometime in the fall, and we are continuing to plan for upcoming events such as the Back to School Bash and other things that SVA will be at. But other than that, nothing.
All right, Mr. Kehoe?
I'm just, again, caught a tiny bit off guard. Give me just 1 second.
Keep them on their toes. Keep them on their toes.
Opening it right now. So we met last Thursday, June 20th, here in this room, where we reviewed and discussed the KPI indicators. KPIs are key performance indicators for both custodial and transportation. We had a lively discussion around the bathroom status at the high schools and what could be done to address some of the cleanliness issues and custodian issues, especially midday in the bathrooms, as well as reviewed the overall KPIs in that process. We also discussed the transportation, our busing KPIs, and the work that they've been doing to get fully staffed and to really train up additional drivers so we're ready for the start of the school year next year. We reviewed a draft of the ADA audit reports. We have had 10 of the 21 or 22 schools. They've got all the data and they're prepared for that process. That will be coming forward back to the F&O and to the full board in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And that is basically an analysis of the interiors of each building and identifying any issues that we have with respect to ADA guidelines and best practices in that process. And then lastly, we reviewed the financial statements for the month of May in the process. We will be having our organizational meeting in July. And at this point, we don't believe that there will be an F&O meeting in July. If there's some capital projects or bond program that comes up, then that might get scheduled, but at this point, there will not be one. And then based upon the new committees, then we'll make the determination as to when subsequent meetings would be.
All right. Just one thing to note, I don't think lively discussion and KPIs go in the same sentence. I don't know if you can.
You talk about the bathrooms. There's some lively discussion that's going on there.
All right, Member McCoy.
So we met tonight, the policy committee met tonight, and we got quite a bit done. We sent several of them back to get a legal opinion on some of them. Professional staff evaluation, that's just some technical changes that we already, if people remember, we already adapted a different policy to be compliant with the law. This has some minor wording and commas. Purchasing, same thing. Then we have prevailing wage, which is to be compliant with the law that was passed in the last legislative session. Payroll deductions, same thing, to be compliant with the laws that were passed in the last legislative. Animals on district property are we're going to have some legal review about this since we're adding animals to some of the school buildings. We'd prefer to have a nice agreement with everybody on the same page. If you've seen what's happening in Ann Arbor, we don't want to do that. And then the last one, religious patriotic ceremonies, we're also punting that over to legal also to get some clarification on that. And then again, the next meeting will probably be in August because we don't ever meet in July.
Gotcha. Thank you. Student Performance and Achievement Committee SPA. Who will be?
That would be me. So the last time we met, we did a vetting of tonight's presentation. Also talked a little more in depth than we will tonight, the fall or the spring data presentation. We also talked in depth about some of the positions and key activities that have been put in place. You'll hear a high-level overview of that tonight, but we did a much deeper dive into that at the last SPA. We don't typically meet in July either. Sometimes we meet in August, depending on need. So as soon as the new committee members are together and stuff, we'll set those meetings and move forward. So.
All right, thank you. So for the President's report, just one item. As we all know, July 23rd is our annual organizational meeting, which means we elect different officers for the position of President, Vice President, Secretary, and Treasurer. So similar to last year, what I'm going to do is read a brief description of each role and then open it up to see if anyone would like to throw their name in the hat. Then I'll give you the floor to state why you would like to fill an officer role and what you feel you would want to contribute. So the Board of Education is responsible for those 4 positions I mentioned: President, Vice President, Secretary, Treasurer. From a President standpoint, responsible for presiding over board meetings, setting the agenda, and ensuring that the board is fulfilling its duties and responsibilities. Vice President, responsible for supporting the President and may assume the duties of the President in his or her absence. Secretary, responsible for taking minutes and maintaining accurate records and board action. And then Treasurer, responsible for overseeing the financial affairs of the district, including budgeting, accounting, and financial reporting. So because I didn't give you guys a heads up on this, we'll just go around and you can indicate if you plan to seek one of the positions. If you feel like going into what you hope to accomplish, great. If not, we can go over that during the during the next meeting on July 23rd. So I'll start with myself. I do not plan to seek the president's position again. It's been an amazing 2 terms, but I'm going to step down and let someone else have all the fun for a couple terms. So I'm looking to become a member once again. I'll go to my right.
So I am open to being the treasurer again as part of the process. I've been the treasurer for a number of years, and I think that we have a lot of things to accomplish in the work that we do in the Finance and Operations Committee. In particular, the conversations that we've started around athletics and activities and equity and funding in those programs across the district to really move that forward in this next school year, and to be prepared to support the future budget discussions for 25-26.
I am fine being just a trustee, but I'm willing to, nobody does stuff. I'm flexible.
I have also really enjoyed this last 2 years, just sitting here.
So you're refreshed and ready to jump back in as president? Is that
Jump
what I'm
back
hearing?
in.
That's what I'm kind of hearing? No?
No, but I do have an idea of who I'd like to do that job.
Okay.
And I'll speak with them later.
Fantastic. All right. Any other comments regarding? No? All right, with that. Oh, one thing I do want to bring up, Mr. Patterson brought to my attention, we did pass a resolution to appoint him and Saeed to the board. That resolution is over as of today. So my recommendation is that we roll an appointment of, Student Voice and Action Committee, period, into our annual business meeting, just for consistency, and that way we know the time that you're going to make those appointments, and so I'm throwing that out there for.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Josh, do you know if the SBA has identified potential candidates that would be?
So, from what SVA elected Sai and I for 2 year as like a 2-year term, if I remember correctly. So we have not looked into replacing yet, but that would be something that I think we would do next year.
It feels like it's been longer than 2 years, but it hasn't, has it?
So it's been 1 year where I've been co-chair, but remember I came
Yeah,
before that for like a
it feels
year.
like
So
you've
it's
been here.
a while.
It feels like you've been here forever, like you've been a member of our team. Okay, so then if that's the case, then yeah, we just bring it forward, and then it'll probably be just us electing that, because I think they've made their choices known.
Correct.
So in the future, though, would this SVA do that prior to our meeting?
Yeah, and I think it's probably something you still want to discuss, because at the last meeting, we started talking about the process. So I know that there are other students that were interested, and they were talking about potentially getting to some small subcommittees to kind of go through that process of looking at all SVA members. What is the membership intake going to look like? What is the process for co-chairs? What would be the process for our subcommittee representatives? So it might be, I love the idea, and that we might be able to get to that. If we're not there this year, maybe you get the conversation and the vote in August, but then in the following year, you're able to get it on track, just so that they have a process to see who all might be interested.
Yeah, so maybe we look at a 1-year term, which then gives us time to work out that methodology, and then put that in place for next year.
That's a good idea.
Does that make sense? Everyone good with that? Okay. All right, that does it for the president's report. I will turn it over to Dr. Merritt.
Thank you,
Superintendent.
President Wilson. I spent a lot of time just going through a year at a glance last meeting, and really just giving accolades to our staff and our students for finalizing a wonderful school year. Right as soon as school is over, we begin the process of construction. So I thought tonight it would be appropriate to just give some updates on the construction. Again, continue to thank our community for their support of our 2020 bond. Remind our community for updates on our 2020 bond. They're available at all times on our website, and we still continue to do our Bond Tuesdays, but we just try to keep our community informed on our progress on the bond. Coming up this summer, we're working on East Middle School. We're going to have civil and architectural interior renovations. The interior upgrades will include new ceilings, casework, kitchen renovations. They're going to have locker room improvements that have all come here. We've had discussion at the board level. The project features the construction of a new main office and a secure vestibule. If you recall, in East, we kind of did a temporary fix to to make sure that all of our schools had these secure vestibules, but now we have the full design that will come into play this year. Moving on to East Middle School, the same architectural and mechanical renovations are occurring, along with the creation of a fully renovated main office. And again, this was with the goal of creating that secure vestibule, meaning that families will have to, or visitors will have to buzz through the office before being able to go into the main corridors of the school. Over the summer, they're going to continue the demolition and setting up of the office underground plumbing and drywall. That's not the pretty stuff, but it's the necessary stuff in order to get these projects underway. Hoban, and if you recall, at the board level, we've been dealing with this flooding at Hoban, and so we made a decision to advance some work out of Hoban to bring it earlier in the bond, so that will begin taking place this summer to address those water problems. And this is going to install an underground detention system and undertake some essential drainage upgrades. And we're keeping fingers crossed that this is the final fix to improve that campus functionality. Finally, at PCEP, there is so much construction underway, and it has been ongoing. The third stadium renovations are underway. They include the field, bleachers, and a running track. At Canton High School, they are continuing the work on the 17,000 square foot addition, which will house the multi-purpose room, team rooms, restrooms, and concession stands. We're working at Plymouth, the band room addition, as well as that natatorium. That is a beautiful sight to see. So if you haven't had an opportunity, we definitely want to encourage, and we can arrange for our communities to have some tours of this facility. So that natatorium and the multi-purpose room, that pool I think is an 8-lane swimming pool. 8-lane swimming pool, and it features a diving well. Also in that building, you have a gymnasium and a 2-story grand corridor. So again, as we work through our bond, there's more projects than funds all the time, but it really is a goal to ensure that our facilities represent the incredible learning that has taken place within our classrooms for our students, because that is what they deserve. So again, stay informed of our 2020 bond progress by visiting our district website, and continue to review our bond 2020 features across our communications. I want to thank our communications department as well for, they have had, they've been amazing, and they're just continuing to get out there, and I have been very pleased with the influx of social media updates as we work for transparency for our community. And every time I'm learning reels and all of that, but every time I'm going through these reels, P-CCS is popping up. So I appreciate the work that you're doing to keep our community informed of the bond and all other things P-CCS. So thank you for that. That concludes.
Fantastic. All right. Teaching and learning, Beth Rowe, this is the spring data review presentation.
Thank you. So thank you, President Wilson. Every year in the fall, we do a fall data review, kind of set the benchmark, kind of show our benchmark and baseline data for the fall. And then we come back in the spring to kind of show the years, what's happened over the course of the year in several different areas. Tonight, I will be, in a minute, turning it over to Jonathan Flukes, our Director of Data Assessment, Research, and Evaluation. But we'll also do a really quick high-level overview of some of the key activities that we've put in place this year, and talk a little bit about the data from those, and then what will happen with those positions or those activities moving forward. And to do that, we have members of the teaching and learning team here. Executive Director of Elementary Education, Dr. Denise Lilly. Mr. James Hunter, who is the principal at Liberty Middle School, will be filling in for Mr. Anthony Ruella tonight. Hal Hurd, Executive Director of High School Education, and then Kevin Carr, our Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction Assessment and Professional Development, will kind of sharing an update in those areas. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Flukes, who will start us off.
Clicker work? Let's see. It is. Okay, so here's the purpose for tonight. It's really just to give an update on kind of where we are, as Beth talked about, kind of where we are in relation to our dynamic plan. We'll talk about the data we see and how it relates to some of the key activities we've done over the past year, and then we'll quickly confirm our mode of instruction for the next year. You'll see that slide coming up. So just as a reminder, this is kind of the overarching goals we have as a district. So I just want to have this here as a placeholder for, this is kind of the ultimate strategic goals we have as a district. And specifically for our teaching and learning department, our key objectives are increasing student achievement and reducing gaps, and supporting the whole child by means of a responsive, multi-tiered system of support for students. So that's kind of the overarching objectives we live by in teaching and learning. And related to that, relating to meeting the needs of all students, this is kind of the formal declaration that we will be offering a virtual option for students the next school year in grades 3 through 12. I'm not going to read, I promise I won't read every word of this slide, but this kind of lays out that the last few slides, kind of that logic model of kind of how these things that we're presenting today fit within the strategic objectives as well as our dynamic plan. So it kind of just lays out kind of a logic model for how all those things are connected, the data we use, how we access them, and some of the goals and outcomes we have for our department and the district. So just a review, so today's presentation, really we're looking at very high-level data. These aren't data that are going to drive our everyday ins and outs of what we do with students, but these are high-level pieces of data that give us some indication of where we need to be headed, where things we might be looking at going forward, and to kind of point us in general directions for further investigation. So these data points can't tell us everything about students, so we do look at other data points, but they're a nice common set of data things that we can use to kind of guide our paths for the next school year. And these are the big buckets of data we'll be looking at tonight, from attendance, behavior, our social emotional surveys, and then a few pieces of achievement data we'll be digging into. So we'll start with student attendance. Good news, attendance is improving overall. Looking at kind of the last few years, we had a very similar slide in the fall, and that trend is continuing that we were looking at in the fall. So if we look all the way back to our pre-pandemic years, we're kind of creeping back up toward that pre-pandemic level of overall daily attendance rate across all of our student groups for the most part. And then another metric we use to look at when we talk about student attendance is a metric called chronic absenteeism. So that also is, in a good way, decreasing. So fewer students are considered chronically absent over the course of this year compared to the last few years. And we're seeing that across most of our student groups as well. So we're getting back toward that pre-pandemic level of fewer students being considered chronically absent. Now looking at some high-level behavior data, more good news, suspensions have decreased compared to last year. So we've had 90 fewer suspensions compared to all of last year. And Mr. Herr is going to talk about some more key activities, about some other nuances of how some of those changes in how we treat behavior have also offset some times that students have spent out of school due to suspension. So we'll talk more about that later. And looking at our student perception surveys regarding social emotional learning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to present those key topic areas for each of the surveys and then show you some key findings and then show you some data reports that represent those key findings. So really, this is a review of the content that we have on our surveys. So we've seen this a few times now. So this is the content for our K2 survey. And just a reminder, the K2 survey is teachers rating students in these areas. So students at that level don't respond themselves. It's students in older grades do that, but this is just teachers responding on these topic areas around their students in grades K through 2. And some of the key findings from the survey from this spring is that students were rated overall more favorably in all of those topic areas in the fall, compared to the fall as well as compared to last spring. So that's some good news, some good trends to see. And I've pointed out some areas of potential strength and focus as well. I won't talk about each of those, but some of those potential areas of focus, might be some self-management things. Some of those things that, all kids in those early grades need to work on some of that self-management thing. So you'll see that in these reports here where looking at the K2 survey, self-management there is the least rated one, the least favorably rated one of students. And again, that's more about students' self-management of their able to focus and control their own behaviors. So naturally, that's something that all kids need to work on, but overall you'll see positive changes from last spring, which is that third column there with the increases, and then the final column is changes from, the second column is changes from the fall, And then the last column on the right is changes from last spring. So again, you'll see some increases over both time frames, which is very positive. Now as we shift to our older students who do take the survey themselves, these are the content areas that they are rating themselves on these surveys, and I'm going to present the 3-5 separately, and then I'll present the 6-12 after that. So some of the key findings from grades 3 through 5 is that compared to the fall survey, students rate themselves more favorably in most areas, as you'll see. And also, most of the topic areas were above the 60th percentile when we look at the national norms on those surveys. And again, I've highlighted some of the areas that kind of we're showing some strengths in, as well as some areas that we might potentially focus in on for students in those grade spans. And a similar data representation here, where the percent favorable is that blue bar, where the most favorable items are at the top. And in the grades 3 through 5 and 6 through 12, we get a national percentile comparison or a national norm comparison here, which we don't get in the K2. So this is a new data point that's not in the previous report that shows kind of that comparison to the national percentile there. And then the last column is our increase from the last fall administration. Now as we switch to our 6 through 12 group, again here, same representation, and we see some areas here that maybe are some focus areas we can see here. Some of the more lower rated in terms of favorability or the lower percentile rankings are possibly some areas of focus for that student group. And these links in this report will provide item by item breakdown. So that same kind of view, we can look at those item by item. So if you have time to review those, these are each item and the favorability rating for each of the 3 survey groups. So now moving to achievement data. More students are passing courses. So we looked at semester grades for 6 through 12, looking at kind of the core content areas. And here we've provided a trend line for the last 5 semesters that we have data for so far. We don't have the final semester for this year just yet. But you're seeing increases both across time and for each of the content areas. And we're also seeing very identical trends for our student groups as well. But this shows all students in the district in grades 6 through 12. And now we shift to our benchmark assessments, NWEA. So this is another piece of achievement data we typically look at. And I wanted to just kind of set the stage for what the NWEA MAP assessments are. And so that's in the blue bolded text there. So really, the NWEA MAP growth assessments are designed to measure student achievement and growth over time and compare that to a national norm. That's what it does really well. But we're also able to use some of the data and some of the reports to help guide and inform some of the other things we do here in the district. And I've listed them there in bullets. So a little bit about the metrics, how we're going to be showing some of the data and talking about some of the data here. So remember that NWEA is primarily a national, it's an achievement and growth assessment, but we use national norms to kind of guide how we are doing on these assessments. So most of the metrics are about comparing to what's typical or predicted based on the national norm. So those are the core of what those metrics are. And we'll be looking at achievement, so we'll look at RIT scores, which is kind of the scale score that NWEA provides, as well as a percentile rank. So we'll look at percentile ranks for students, as well as we'll show kind of a new report that shows percentile ranks for our entire system. So they have student percentile ranks as well as what they call school percentile ranks or school norms. And we'll look at those in a couple charts. And just to give you a context, a percentile, so if you're scoring at the 50th percentile, whether you're a student or whether you're a school or a district, that means you're performing better than 50% of other students or other schools or systems in that norming group. Now in terms of growth, NWA provides kind of a typical, or what they see as a typical projection for how a student scores between testing periods. And so you'll be looking at the percent of students who met that typical growth projection that NWA sets for each student when they take that first administration. So this is kind of the core of the rest of the slides. This is kind of the real meat of it here, and the rest of the slides will show you graphical representations of these findings here. So generally, all grade levels performed well above the national norm when we look at achievement data in both reading and math. And when we look at a system, P-CCS ranks very high when we look at comparing our scores as a system compared to the national norms. And depending on the grade level and the content area, we rank from 70th to the 86th percentile when we look at our system as a whole. And when we look at student group by student group, that most student groups we have in our system also perform within that national average range as well. And in terms of growth, all grade levels as a group met or exceeded the national norm growth projection when we look at both reading and math, and that most student groups that you will see perform within that national growth predicted range or higher. So in general, very high achievement, and we're making good progress in terms of growth over time. So here is an example of grade level performance when we take the district as a unit, in aggregate, and compare that to the national norm. So Plymouth Canton is the dark blue dot, and the national average is the gray dot. So that represents how far above the national norm we perform. And this is using RIT score. This is the scale score that's produced when students take the assessments. This is the average scale score for each grade level from this year. And so somebody say, well, what does that even mean? How much higher than the nation is that? So this next slide kind of shows you then a breakdown of the percentile rank of that difference. Like how much higher is that? And so if we look at the very first one on the left, which is the kindergarten reading, where it says 82. So that means kindergartners as a whole, for a whole system, if we rank them against all the other systems in the country, we're the 82nd percentile rank. So 82% of all school systems score lower than Plymouth Canton if we look at kindergarten reading scores this year. And that's the rest of those dots represent the percentile rank for each of the other grade levels for achievement this year. So the rest of the slides are basically kind of a review of those key findings. These show the achievement, the average student achievement, and then we're going to look at the growth, the meeting of predicted growth for each of the student groups. And I'm going to present them with the K1 group or the K2 group first because they take the spring assessment, and then I'll present the 3 through 8 group because they take the winter assessment. So here are the K2 students and their average percentile rank, average student level percentile rank. That gray bar in the back, it represents the national average norm range there. So you can see here, on average, each of those bars is well above, at or above that average range. This is that same group of students now looking at their fall to spring growth. Did they meet their predicted growth from fall to spring? And this represents the percent of students that did. So these are in the middle and at the high end of the average range. And here's the student group breakdown for our K2 students in terms of achievement. So this is their average percentile rank. Again, most student groups are within or above that average range, which is that gray area in the back. And then this represents the percent of those same students and where they were in terms of meeting their predicted growth from fall to spring. You see here that all these are within that average range in this chart. Now moving to our older students. Here's the grade level breakdown for achievement. Again, very similar to our younger students in terms of very high level average achievement. Again, going from fall to winter now, these students, they don't take a spring assessment because it does impact with the state assessment, so we look at fall to winter. And again, very high projection percentages here. And then looking at student groups, we have a few student groups that are still, only a few that are below that national average range, but most are within or above that national average range for the older students. And then here's the percent median of predicted growth. All right, and now I'll bring up Dr. Libby. Dr. Libby's here. Thank you. She'll start to engage in a discussion about kind of the key activities that have been going on this school year.
Good evening, everyone. So at the elementary level, I'm going to just highlight a couple of different initiatives that we had that showed significant success. So our elementary student success specialists were in 8 of our buildings this year over the last 2 years. And you'll see, and I'm not going to read all of the data points, but you'll see where we have had significant decreases in suspensions over the last couple of years, as well as increases in competencies in SELs, social emotional learning, over the last 2 years. As Mr. Flukes alluded to earlier, there are things that we're going to continue to work on. Fortunately, we have funding with 31A that we'll be able to continue these positions. And so thinking about, again, that self-management, emotional regulation, some of our youngest learners in kindergarten in particular are the students that many of our student success specialists have had the opportunity to work with. So they will continue that work into next year. And then looking at our teachers on special assignment, over the last 2 years, our teachers on special assignment have done a wonderful job in the roles that they have, in the work that they provided for our students and in collaboration with their colleagues. So you'll see just very quickly here, we had 474 students that were serviced in 13 elementary schools. Of the 474, 374 met their growth goals from fall 23 to winter 24. In addition to that, 324 students closed the gap by exceeding the national minimum reference that Jonathan just alluded to before. As we know, the 11T funding has expired, and so we will not continue in this capacity. However, we are continuing to look at our Tier 1 instruction through the work that you'll hear about it in a bit later around instructional coaches. We are looking to make sure that we are strengthening that instruction, and we will continue to, through the use of 31A funds, be able to support our students that have more additional needs through some 31A funding. And now I am going to pivot and turn it to Mr. Hunter.
So at the middle level,
Go back.
sorry.
One more back.
There we go. So at the middle level, I'm going to talk about 2 key positions that we've had over the last 2 years. Our Dean of Student Support and our TOSA, Teacher on Special Assignment. So for our Dean, we've seen significant growth and success with this role. And I've actually brought a partner with me, my Dean of Student Support, Ms. Nicastri, who may speak a little bit more in detail of the things that we've seen. So in the grand scheme of things, we see Tier 1 where the Dean comes in and supports all students, right? Building-wide PBIS and moving that along in a significant way. Excuse me. Looking at panorama SEL survey data in the areas of sense of belonging, emotional regulation, and really looking at that data and see how we can move students forward in those 2 areas. When we drill down a little bit deeper, Tier 2 and Tier 3, those would be students who need a little bit more support from our Dean, and we looked at course grades, office referrals, and attendance. So with all of that in mind, the Dean had taken it upon themselves to really drill down again with PBIS, being active in supervision, being present with all students, and then as we go deeper, providing students who may have academic or behavioral struggles and working with them more closely in collaboration with the counselors, administration, and supporting those students through check-in and check-out, processes that allow them to see success ultimately. So key findings that we have, 81 or 82% of our caseload students successfully met their individual goals. Out-of-school suspensions are down 11%.
And then we've seen a slight increase in supportive relationships and emotional regulation in a number of those students across all 5 middle schools. And obviously, we're looking and continuing the support for the Dean of Support for next year. Julie, do you want to share a little bit?
We'll have to do that at the end.
Okay,
If we
okay,
have questions.
awesome.
Yeah.
And then nextly, the TOSA. So the TOSA, Teacher on Special Assignment, this focus across, again, all 5 middle schools was focused in the area of mathematics and in helping and supporting students in that way. This is a role that exists across all 5 middle schools as well. And the primary focus of this role is to push into classrooms and create a co-teaching model. And with that, we're able to have the TOSA work more closely with students who need that additional support, with pre-teaching, reteaching, and pull-out resources if they need it. And we've seen a considerable amount of NWEA achievement and growth with those students as well as their academic grades. In short, 73 students were served in math and 28 in ELA. Comparatively to our students who did not receive TOSA support, 61% met or exceeded their NWEA growth or had a passing, or earned a passing grade, of 93%. Comparatively, students not receiving TOSA support saw 55% met or exceeded growth in NWEA and 93% earning a passing grade. So while we know this role, or the funding, 11T is moved on, all 5 principals have been really diligent and committed to making this structure a part of our schedules for next year. So we have a similar structure in place for next year as it relates to the TOSA role. So I'm going to pass it to Mr. Howard.
Good evening. For the high school, I'm going to talk about the high school student success room. Within our multi-tier system of support, key new support has been the student support room. This functions as a tier 2 behavior intervention designed to keep students in school and engaged with instruction rather than utilizing out-of-school suspensions. The focus of the SSR room is multifaceted. Students or discipline consequences in the room while still being able to attend classes and receive instruction as appropriate. It's about the learning. So the SSR teacher provides individualized lessons related to the behavior infraction like conflict resolution or anti-vaping education. It also allows us to intervene meaningfully for attendance issues. Previously, our only recourse was to file truancy paperwork or dropping students from classes. Now we can assign the SSR room as a intervention while providing support to improve their attendance. Overall, the student success room has allowed us to revise our behavior processes to reduce disproportionate disciplinary impact and keep more students in school learning. To measure success, we're tracking discipline referral data, out-of-school suspension rates, attendance metrics, and the amount of instructional time being recaptured by reducing exclusions. Some key findings so far: we're seeing around 36% decrease in overall discipline events, resulting in referrals and consequences compared to the previous year. Out-of-school suspensions have decreased about 19% year over year, and our high school is now 24% below the 2018-19 levels. Near the end of the school year, we had recaptured over 157 days of instructional time that would previously have been lost, which accounts for over 90 students and 945 class periods. We're also reintegrating community partnership programs, like with groups like GrowthWorks, through work in the student success room. And lastly, we're reviewing attendance and behavior policies for any potential biases that need revisiting. Overall, the student success room is helping reduce lost instructional time, keeping kids in school, and providing targeted behavior interventions, and allow us to revise practices through an equity lens. Next, I'll be speaking about our TOSAs at the high school level. So the teachers on special assignment for student academic support at the high school has been pivotal in providing targeted support, funded by ESSER 11T grant. This initiative, spanned 2 years from 2022 to 2024. Our primary goal is to stabilize learning loss for student groups disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So the data that was measured during this particular program was attendance records, panorama student competency and well-being measures, academic grades, feedback, and TOSA-supported student and family perception survey. Some of the key findings: we observed several positive outcomes. 12% of 136 students served by the program showed dramatic improvement in their grades, along with reducing the number of failing courses. Both students and parents provided overwhelmingly positive feedback, with 95% expressing satisfaction with the support they received. We identified and addressed several barriers, including issues with phone use, attendance, assignment completion, impacting 90% of our students. And moving forward, we'll continue to monitor the need for additional support and interventions. This will involve close collaboration between our counselors, administration, teachers, through our implementation of the early warning intervention and monitoring system team. And now I will pass it on to Kevin.
Okay. Two more key activities that are success stories. You likely know that we've been doing some really significant work in updating our elementary ELA programming. We're focusing on foundational skills. Sometimes the teachers will talk about U-Fly and morphology, this is really important because addressing this are leading indicators to future success of our students in subsequent grades. So our teachers were trained, 300 teachers trained, supported for thousands of hours by our coaches throughout the year. The results were we saw increased percentages in kindergarten and first grade in these foundational skills, so that's really significant for our future success. As we move forward, we'll continue to work on the instructional use of data to help guide where the coaches work and how the teachers work with students on these foundational skills. And next, we've got a really important initiative about instructional coaching. This one focuses on our K-5 areas in particular. There are 14 building coaches that are in play. These are coaches who work with teachers in particular on Tier 1 and sometimes Tier 2 academics. As we work on this year, we've really focused significantly on training these coaches in coaching practice, helping them understand how to target their time, how to make sure that we're focusing on the instructional use of data to help them think about their work. The results of this is we worked again with over 300 teachers, thousands of hours. A really important key metric that we found is essentially that when the students of teachers who are working with coaches more than 5 hours, so when a teacher is working with a coach more than 5 hours, their students learn more. And so the upshot on this is that we want to make sure that we continue to focus on this, supporting coaching in our learning environments, because when teachers do that, kids benefit. As we move into 24-25, we've got really significant work that we've ended the year on. We've got each coach has worked with principals to develop a plan for the year to focus on coaching, focus on particular areas of instruction where we see we need focus from our data, and we're expecting to see even more success down the road.
And I will kind of continue to talk about just some high-level overviews of some of the additional work that will be continuing as well. So as Mr. Carr indicated, we're going to continue strengthening our Tier 1 implementation using our building-based and district-based coaches, our instructional coaches. We're going to continue implementing additional supports specifically for identified demographic groups. So you'll notice that we do have areas where we still have growth for certain groups and populations and pockets of students. Doing that at the individual level, doing that at the school level, doing that at the district level, by really having a lot of data cohort meetings, looking at individualized student data and creating action plans. Providing additional training on U-Fly and kind of reintegrating and reinventing and revising our training around Envisions Math. So you'll remember we rolled out Envisions Math during the pandemic, so we're doing some additional training and support around Envisions. We're implementing collaborative classroom. Recently, we brought to the board's table collaborative classroom, which is the other side of the coin to make the full puzzle for the K-5 literacy program. So that will help enhance our literacy skills. There's the reading portion, the writing portion, so it helps to enhance those skills. Providing additional Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports using our 31A grants and other funding sources. So the one thing we always do is look at our data, let that data drive what are our needs, and then we look at our funding sources, or what other funding sources can we kind of go after and look at to be able to implement additional supports for our students. You heard the team talk about some different programs like the Early Warning and Intervention Monitoring System, the EWIMS teams. That's a team at the high school that monitors data and then makes action plans at the high school level. We also have our MTSS teams, multi-tiered systems of support teams at the other levels. We also have our equity cohorts that is looking at all of those areas to help strengthen our instruction and our instructional practices and our curriculum across all of our schools. And finally, you'll notice, as we talked earlier, about chronic absenteeism, and I want to name and frame something that maybe wasn't quite clear to the community as well when we talk about chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is when a student is absent more than 10% of the eligible days of a school year. That absenteeism does not matter if it's excused, unexcused, verified, or unverified. It means that the student has missed instructional time. So a student who has missed 18 days of school during a year is considered chronically absent. After the 10th school day, any student that is missing 10% or more of the school time that we have been in session is considered chronically absent. So there are different options and different activities and things that play into that, but it is missed instructional time. It is a national pandemic. It is a statewide issue. It is a countywide issue. We are trending back towards pre-pandemic levels, but it's important for us to really keep this in the forefront. So we're doing a cross-collaboration across all of our district departments, and we're engaging in countywide and local initiatives to target and combat chronic absenteeism. So you're going to hear more about this. We're going to engage the community in different ways. We're going to look at ways to better communicate this and then support our students to ensure that they're in school and learning where we need them to be. And with that, we'll kind of pause and take any questions you might have. There may be times I'll have team members kind of pop up and answer any questions you might have or share additional information as well. So, thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I'll start to my left with Member McCoy.
So, yeah, I had some questions about the chronic absenteeism. You answered quite a few of them. Because I noticed when you look at the graphs, some of the student groups who are not achieving well are also the same ones who have a lot of absenteeism, and kids who are not in school are not learning. So I appreciate you flagging that out as a big, huge problem that you are trying to combat. I also really like this I like to be able to see when it's compared. So on some of the slides where they show, it's small, but it shows the other years also. It's easy to see where we're going with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do appreciate the fact that you seem to understand where the failures are and you have a plan for that. I, of course, as always, would like it to move much faster because the kids who are not doing well in 8th grade right now are in 8th grade and they're not going to be in 8th grade next year. So, but thank you for the presentation. This was lovely. I appreciate all the data.
Okay. I had a question with the groups with the attendance. I know we have different groups listed, or but would it be also helpful to maybe have a category that is kids out of district, like coming in, because I know that can cause a lot of lateness if they're if they have to drive in, whether they don't have any public way of getting here. Is there a difference in that? Is that something like
school
choice? Yeah, like the kids coming in from the other counties and that is that cause a difficulty with attendance also?
We could
Or
drill
like
down to
any
get
late?
that information in terms of things being identifiable and based on numbers that wouldn't be included in a public
Because I know
presentation, but
my own
yeah.
experience driving to a charter school is You know, a little different than them walking. So, and then, I also, like for the suspensions and that, is there, anything where we keep track of people that, or kids that have reoccurrences of, you know, like the success shows that suspension, that we're keeping kids in, but is a lot of the data on some of the same kids doing the same things, or is it just all different kids? You know, just having it more concrete as far as.
So our
the
buildings
reoccurrences.
look at that data, disaggregate that data, also make plans. So when you heard about like the deans of student success, the elementary student success specialists, our counselors, our deans of students and stuff, as we're looking at our students, what you're talking about is what's called recidivism, when a student is doing multiple events. So they look at the student individually and then look at, are there consistent patterns of behavior, and what should we do to educate students in a positive way to help them gain the skills and strategies to be able to navigate kind of additional behavioral issues. So we work really hard around that to help our students stay in school.
Okay, so is that part of the information, and then the statuses of, is that included? Like if a student does something twice, that goes also recorded. I mean, that's made part of the information as far as the percentage of students and things doing things. Does that make sense?
I think I know what you're asking,
yeah,
which
it's
is,
like,
does it count as, they're counted as individual incidents,
Okay,
but we
yeah,
do measure incidents with students to help students learn skills, emotion regulation,
so in that
management
percentage-
skills.
Yeah, so in that percentage.
Yeah.
So if a student does something twice, that gets included in the percentage then too, like.
Correct. The number of incidents
incidences.
would be individual incidents regardless of the number of students. But do we look at that data as well? Yes. At the building level, at the team level, at the district level, yes. We look at various levels of behavior data, attendance data. We drill down a lot more than what you see here.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then I had a question about the teacher perception surveys, you know, in the K through 2. And is that something that all teachers are required? I mean, I personally would feel uncomfortable making a perception on some of the things, the categories that they had. And if a teacher is uncomfortable with that, is that something that they have to do, make perception, or, I mean, is that, because that's kind of a subjective sort of thing, and if they don't really, with all the kids they have, they may not have been able to make an accurate or.
Yep. I think it helps to look at the questions and how they're posed, because what it does is it asks the teacher not to make an overall perception of the student. So it's not like, how is Beth Rail doing in this area? There are specific questions that the teachers respond to and specific metrics that they're asked to use. So it is an expectation of our teachers that they complete those surveys for our students so that we see the areas of growth and support for our students. And if you look at the questions on
Yeah.
the.
Well, I
yeah,
do.
go ahead.
I was kind of, how often is this, where is it? During the past 30 days, how considerate was the student of his or her classmates? Now, if you have a very shy student, you might not see something outwardly. So, like, if you didn't see something, do you say, well, I didn't see anything, so, you know, how does that get rated? I mean, because kids are always doing things we don't always pick up. And then there's different personalities. You've got shy kids that might be very empathetic, but you might not have seen it, or they weren't comfortable in a class setting where you have all these kids. So, that's basically what I'm saying. I just don't, and then that carries on. Does that carry on in Panorama then to the next grade level, what they record?
So our data is stored in Panorama, yes.
Okay, so I just think, I just kind of disagree with the perception part. I don't know if that's, on some of the questions and some of the things that it just, I don't know. I don't know if a teacher felt uncomfortable not to do that. I would think that that would be something. I think it's kind of more like just some of the stuff of their overall, how well does the student learning strategies help them? You know, the focus. I mean, some kids can be totally focused and not appear to be focused. I mean, just, there's a lot of things I think subjective. And I think different values that children come from and the different values that the actual teacher has could actually change the whole perception of that. And then that carries on with a student. And so the next teacher then will look at it and go, oh, this is what they were doing. And that could be totally off and that child could actually be treated in a certain way that really isn't.
One thing we've been
No.
talking about as a team in terms of an opportunity to talk through and maybe address some questions that you have is doing more of a workshop setting. So when we do these presentations, as you hear, we're kind of staying high level to just provide the board and the community with an update, but to be able to kind of drill down to some of those questions that you have.
Yep.
We'll plan for next year doing more of workshop settings that are non-board meeting nights. so
Yeah.
We can sit back
Okay,
and
sure.
kind of go through.
Yeah, I
and
was just
address
trying to give her
some of those.
examples of what I meant.
Yeah.
Because, and then, so the proficiency on those charts, it's student proficiency. Or we say we want achievement, what's the proficiency? Like, the chart shows that they've achieved this compared to the NWA. What is are they proficient? Like, what is that showing in proficiency?
Do you want to explain that a little bit better, Jonathan? Thanks.
Sorry.
Yep,
I have
that's
one
okay.
question.
We'll both take it.
So which
Yep.
chart were you looking
Well,
at that
like,
might help to kind of
just some of
focus
the,
it? So just keep, I think the key thing is to remember the purpose of the NWEA assessments.
Mhm.
It's not a proficiency test.
Okay.
It is an achievement test that gives us norms to a national sample.
Okay.
So it's
All
more
right,
of like
that
comparative,
answers
how are we doing compared to the nation, and are our kids moving forward as compared to the nation?
Okay.
So that's kind of the purpose. So these aren't proficiency like our MSTEP tests,
All
our
right.
SATs. It's like, these are just comparisons to the nation.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, that's.
But that would be a
that's
good thing for kind of like Dr. Mary talked
Workshop.
about, like a
Okay.
workshop setting where we can talk about other ways we can think about NWA, because there are some linkages to predictions on how kids do on MSTEP from NWA data. So that might help kind of frame
help
that
connect.
for you. So
Okay.
that could be something we can focus on at another time.
All right, thank you. That cleared it up. Thank you.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Dr. Merritt, or
Mm.
Member Kehoe?
Josh can go before.
Yeah, can I just want to ask a quick question, building off of what Member Ricard said. So does the panorama data that the teacher puts in for the student, is it shown, like if a teacher, let's say I'm in kindergarten right now, and a teacher gave me, or scored me, could the teacher that I have in first grade see what the teacher said in kindergarten regarding me? And is that like given to teachers in the next year?
Do you know the answer to that off the top of your head, Jonathan?
Yeah, like
I
an
think
overall
it-
like
a
topic
score,
area
yeah.
score
But
they
not-
could
yep.
see, but it's not. But there's no like anecdotal notes.
Right.
It's just like a score, overall score for topic area. So that's kept and stored, so we can see if kids are improving. If students are rated low, we can see if the students are improving. So yes, but I don't know if we ask the teacher if they look at the prior year scores before they rate them, probably they would. Most of them would say no, but that's something we can see. But they do have access to some level of data.
Thank you.
So I have a number of questions. I'll take a few now, and then we can go back around, and I can get some more, or you can have me do them all now. Chronic absenteeism. I think one of the things that's a challenge with chronic absenteeism is it is both excused and unexcused absences. And one of the things that we've seen in COVID times is the recommendation to stay home when you're sick. And I think we're seeing more of that where students do stay home when they're sick, which is good for our school population as a whole because we don't spread communicable diseases in the school. I think that one of the struggles with chronic absenteeism is exactly what Trustee McCoyne said, is that students that aren't in school aren't learning.
Right.
But I think that we've also identified opportunities to better support students when they're not in school. So I guess my question is there a way for us to separate the categorizations of students that are sick versus just absentee, excused versus unexcused, and then how do we provide support for those students, especially for those that might have chronic illnesses that would be out of school for long periods of time?
Mr. Tiskowitz, would you like to talk about the first part, about how it's disaggregated a bit, and then I'll take the second piece?
Sure. When we look at attendance data, there's a variety of different ways that it can be reported. Verified, which means the parent has called in. Unverified, where we haven't heard from the parent. And then there are specific categories of, illness, funerals, all the doctor's appointments and those kind of things. So you can narrow it down to specific reason within our system.
So I guess I'm just wondering if there's a cut that we could do of our chronic absenteeism to see whether there's things that would be problematic for us, and then also to identify those students that are having chronic absentee, how do we support them when they're not in school? If someone has got a long-term illness, how do we make sure we provide that support?
Yep, and I can speak to like long-term illnesses and things. So there's several different ways we do that. If it's a shorter term absence and illness, that generally happens with the classroom teacher directly supporting. When we do have students who go on long-term, I have a long-term illness, we have like homebound and hospitalization programs where we send a teacher to the home and do the work, support kind of the liaison between the classroom teachers and the home environment to help support students as well. So we have a number of different strategies even in that, between that spectrum as well, to support students when they're going to be out of school for a period of time.
Okay, because I'm just looking at the numbers, and some of them, especially in the subgroups of 30% or more, it's a huge amount of kids that are missing instruction.
Yep.
And I'd like to better understand maybe what are some of the reasons and what are the strategies that we could do to try to, I know we're trying to get them back in school,
Yep.
but if for whatever reason those kids can't be in school, how do we support them so that they keep their learning journey going?
I will say that was a conversation that went a little deeper in SPA.
Yep.
And it's also talking about education with the community. So if we know that a child is on a health plan and we're doing homebound services, that's different. Sometimes families are making choices, and it could be, they're going across and they may be traveling to another country and they need to stay for an extended amount of time, and students are getting work, but nothing is going to replace that direct instruction in front of that teacher. So again, if you're not in class, your grades could be impacted. So again, talking with families and really educating about the importance of the 180 days to try to be there to the greatest extent possible, unless there is a situation when the child is sick. So looking at the various reasons and working on strategies. And I know that there's some small group thinking now in terms of looking at some practices on how to analyze, separate the things that you're suggesting and provide supports and strategies for families moving forward.
Thank you. My next topic is on the suspension data. Can we add expulsion data to that? Just so we've got the trends when we're bringing this data forward, we include the expulsions as well as the suspensions.
I do believe it is in, we can add it to the slide presentation. I think it is in your data set.
In the companion
In the
document.
companion document.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Then-
I'm sorry. Yeah, those counts should include suspensions or expulsions. So it's basically kids aren't in school, so events where
Is
kids
it-
aren't in school.
So it's a cumulative number?
It's the number of events.
Incidents.
Yep.
The
So I
number of
guess I'm
events.
looking to have, because expulsions are much longer reaching, they're generally full school years or forever type periods. I'd like to make sure that we're calling out the trends that we're seeing for expulsions in this kind of presentation. Because I know that the events are there, but the impact of an expulsion is, for 180 days, is much greater than someone that's suspended for the for 1 day. Okay. My next question is on really our perception survey response rates. Outstanding at the elementary level, middle school starts to drip a little bit, and then, oh my God, 5% at the high school.
Yep, and we've been talking about that internally, because one of the questions that arose for us this year, and when we see that drop off, because we had a much higher percentage in the fall, this year, there were a couple of factors that we believe probably impacted that. One is that in the past, we've had 2 advisories a week. This year, we've had 1. And during the spring, when advisory was taking place, where the surveys are given, is also when we had a lot of heavy scheduling and counseling work being done. Similar to what we see with some of our response rates for our families and stuff, one of our questions is, are we over-surveying people? So we're going to have some conversations internally as a team. We'll have some conversations with our student body to talk about that. Are we seeing survey fatigue at the end of the year? Are we hitting the right times for our student? When's our students? What are the right times to survey? And so we're trying to do a little bit of work around that, because as we see, as students get older, they tend to be less apt to do this in the spring. And also, to things we've talked about earlier this year, is ensuring that we're also following up on, here's what we've done about the responses to what we've heard from you from the surveys. So we're really embedding that work more deeply.
We had spoken previously about engaging our Student Voice and Action Committee in this, and maybe they have some recommendations on how to do this.
Yep.
Because yeah, it's not so good.
Yep.
I do have a few other questions. You want me to just keep going?
Go.
Okay.
Go.
On the TOSAs at the middle school,
Mhm.
you know, I understand that we're continuing the TOSA program at the middle school.
No, we're not continuing the
Maybe I
TOSA program at the
misunderstood.
middle school. What we're doing is, we're looking at, is this the middle school one? No, here's the middle school. What we're looking at is some math, or some push-in math support. So the TOSA program across K-12, ESSER funding ended this year. So,
I got it.
yeah, so it's
Okay,
a different
I'm-
program to get to similar.
I misunderstood.
Okay,
so-
no, that's good.
'cause it's
Thank you
just
for
the
asking.
The results are,
Yep.
I mean, we made a really minor difference in the
Mhm.
process, so,
Yep.
you know,
Mhm.
doing something different is exactly the right thing for us to consider, even if we, even in the face of losing the funding for it, so. Okay, and then, my last one was on the, excuse me, it was the instructional coaching at the elementary
Yeah.
level. Teachers participating in coaching more than 5+ hours. Do we have enough instructional coaches to support all teachers for 5+ hours?
We should have when we look at our numbers and the way we leverage. So yes, and we'll continue to look at that, to look at it, to monitor that activity. Part of understanding of this too is in the fall, the coaches were really deeply steeped in helping with the rollout of UFly,
Right.
and doing follow-up training with that. So instructional coaching per se itself, that was a lot of training, facilitation, support. And so when we get back to a process where we have more time, yes.
So I guess what I'm saying is we're tracking that data, and we're seeing for those teachers that work with instructional coaches saw higher improvement in their NWA scores than those that did not. Is
Mhm.
that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, and I assume we're then sharing that
Mhm.
with our staff, and then
Mhm.
trying to advocate to do more with it. And my main question was to make sure we have enough resources to support that.
Yes, and we also look at how we leverage our district, because we have other coaches along with the building-based coaches. We have district-level coaches, and some different structures that we use as well. So I think what I'm hearing you say, Mr. Kehoe, is if we need additional things, will we bring it back to the board and ask for it? And
Exactly.
the answer is yes.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I want to make sure that we've got the resources to support the programs that are working well.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
When we look at our student behavior data, this is grade 6 to 12, teacher-student relationships,
Yeah.
the growth mindset, and the sense of belonging.
Mhm.
Slide 21.
Mhm.
I recognize the scores are low, but they're also low against the national norm.
Yep.
And those are, I guess, the things that give me concern about it. You know, 2 of them are in the 20th to 39th percentile. You know, we've generally been at the 50th percentile, but these ones are low.
Mhm.
Can you articulate again what we're maybe doing to try to address those issues?
Yep, I'll talk somewhat about it, and then I'll have team members come up as well. You'll remember throughout this year, we've done multiple presentations about each level around some of the activities, the key activities that we're doing to increase a sense of belonging with our students. So a lot of that has to do with just looking at a variety of, so it's a multifaceted approach, one of which starts with curriculum and instruction around, do students see themselves in the content that we're teaching them? How are we engaging them with those structures? I'm going to ask, in this case, any of the team members, Mr. Hurd, if you want to come up, Dr. Lilly, if you want to come up and stuff. And
are
yep.
we seeing
Yep.
this different between middle school and high school, for example? I know that the data's here, I just haven't drilled into it.
We are. As students get older, we see a little bit less. We see some dip in the scores. Remember also, though, the sample size when we're looking here too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
The high
we
school
always,
sample
I
size
always
would be-
say be cautious when you see a small sample size,
fair enough.
because it's hard to make broad blanket conclusions on a small sample
That's a
size.
really
But
good point.
and then and then I'm going to have Mr. Hunter and team as well. So if you want to kind of give a just brief overview, real quick, of some of the things.
So briefly, when you're thinking about very specifically teacher-student relationships as well as sense of belonging, is again going and digging deeper into that data, having those in-depth conversations with students around what exactly they're feeling. So we know, particularly through some of our equity work, that there are students who have said that just the environment may not necessarily be something that they see themselves in. And so how do we continue to foster and cultivate those relationships with the students? I know, and I'm going to ask Julie to come up, because as one of the deans of students at the middle school, that's one of the things that she does every day, is working with those students to foster that sense of belonging and teacher-student relationships. So she can talk more in depth about that as well.
Good evening. At Liberty, I'm going to speak about Liberty specifically because that's where I'm at. I know that the deans at the other schools are doing awesome things as well. One of the things that we started last year, spring of 2022, we started a program called Rising Stars and worked with our elementary feeders and had them basically make us a list of kids who are extremely at risk, SEL, academic, and behavior and attendance issues. And for Liberty, we had about 30 to 33 kids in spring of 2022. I had them come in, it was a shadow day. I paired them up with a current, at the time, 6th or 7th grade student who was their ambassador that they shadowed for the day. They went to classes, they went to recess, they went to lunch, they did passing time, you know, kind of got to have that experience of what middle school is like and build a relationship with students and their ambassador and some teachers and the administrators and some of the other adults in the building. Brought them back, I did in August. I know the other middle schools didn't, but I brought them back in August before school started and had 3 science teachers who came in, and they did 3 different hands-on activities, science activities with them. So they got to rotate and meet 3 different teachers, build positive relationships with them, but also with the other 30 kids that were there, and building those relationships. And we had breakfast, we had lunch, we did a little tour of the building again, kind of giving them a perspective of Liberty without 830 other students there. Did this again this fall. We're calling them the Rising Moons this time. So we did Shadow Day, and again, we'll do the same type of thing again in August. So bringing positive experience, positive relationship building that happens in an environment that's not so filled with too many people and a lot of anxiety, right? Some of the other things that we've done is we started an academic lunch program. I had over 40 students who were academic study buddies, tutors, who helped other students throughout the whole year. And that program, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, was full the whole year, last year and again this year. Another way that we've kind of helped build this sense of community and sense of belonging, I run the PBIS store at Liberty. I had over 200 students volunteer to work in the store. They run the store, they check the kids in and out, they check IDs, you know, they manage the whole store. And I had one parent, sometimes no parent would show up, but at least one parent usually would be in there to kind of just stand there and oversee everything. The parents didn't do anything but just that, and the kids ran it all. And so that was another amazing thing that we've done. We've done, I did the United Nations group, student-led group last year and again this year. We had a cultural fashion show. The girls, we had 12 girls from representing 12 different nations and cultures. Parents came in. We had a parent who came in and did henna for over, I would say we had over 75 students who wanted henna done. So they got to experience that. And so just trying to build more ways that kids can feel like they're a part of something or feel that they're represented in our building. I don't know if I've missed anything.
Fantastic. Does that?
That was great. And one last question or suggestion is that we, not for you, but just overall, we tried to include the acronyms, and RIT is one of those acronyms that we have not articulated well. And I know it's just a I looked it up, it's a Roche unit score or something like that, but we should articulate whatever the acronyms are in our process, because we generally do a really
Yep.
good job with that, but
Should be in that slide, but yeah,
I didn't see it.
And one of the interesting things about a RIT score is similar to NWA. We used to always unpack what NWA is. A RIT score now has become known as the score. And so it's almost not an acronym anymore around education world. So it's really, it's one of those kind of mixed ones. So
I'm just
thank you.
conscious
Yep.
of
Yep.
people
Yes,
in our audience
absolutely.
watching at
Yep.
home that may
Correct.
not know
Yep.
these acronyms.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any further comments?
I've got a couple, but you stole the writ. So if you could jump to slide 22 real quick. So, was it slide 22? I could have definitely wrote. Can you go one more, 21? Yeah. Okay. So, up in the right, it says that, like as pointed out earlier, that 9 through 12 has a 5% response rate, and 6 through 8 has a 78% response rate. So that, from my perspective, would heavily skew the data in 6 through 12 and not really give you a perspective on high school. Are we able to separate those two and look at the data separately between high school and middle school?
Yes.
All right. And then, yeah. So, and I personally like to see that going forward because I feel like it gives you a better picture. Because especially with the 5% response rate, that's only 300 out of 6,000 kids well, so roughly 6,000 if they're in high school. So that's one thing, and that's something I don't know if that's would be great going forward, but I think that would be amazing. Sorry, I've got a lot on there. It's somewhere between 32 and 36. I forgot the number.
What's the topic, Josh?
Yeah, any of those, that one would work great. So, students with IEPs, that section, or any of the sections, the scores, let's use the example of IEPs. Their percentile score of 34, is that compared to other students with IEPs, or is that compared to the average?
It is not. So NWA does not disaggregate their data to that point. So it is the gray bar you see behind is all students, not, it's not a comparison group to a comparison group. So thank you for asking that.
All right, thank you. And then, sorry, I've got a
That's
lot
right.
on here. So kind of building off chronic absenteeism, are you able to determine the pass-fail rate of students that are chronically absent versus the pass-fail rate of those that aren't
Yes.
chronically absent? And is that a data point that we could get sometime?
We can, yes.
All right.
So we look at that data internally, but yes, if that is something that we can disaggregate for the the board and the community.
And then building off absenteeism again, but kind of more segregated, for the at-home / hospital supports where teachers help them, is that available to all grades, elementary through high school, or is it more?
Yes, it's available to any student that needs them based on documentation. So usually when we look at a homebound student or a hospitalized student, they're under medical care, so there are some requirements for those programs. But yes, they're available to all students across K-12.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I got everything. Oh, and I meant to say this at the beginning, but all the graphs are really helpful, so thank you.
And thank Dr. or Mr. Flukes for that.
And very clear,
Yep.
which was amazing.
All right.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
I just wanted to comment. I see we have like the subgroups and stuff, and I always struggle with when we subgroup kids because not all of the kids in those groups actually fit the narrative of those groups. So I don't know, like.
I'm not sure in terms of narrative of those.
Well,
groups.
like when you say a white person, okay, so you don't know where these white people are coming from. You don't know. So to say category, they could be more culturally like an Asian.
So when we look at demographic groups, that is from the state in terms of the
I know.
classification of how. So we're not making generalizations or stereotypes
and
over
it's a state
any
problem.
student group.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I know where it's coming from. Thank
All
you.
right. All right, and with that, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Thank you guys for the presentation and all the
Yeah, thank you.
Q&A follow-up, very thorough. On to finance and operations. We gotta pass a budget. Action item 240685, consider approval of 24-25 proposed budget. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we consider approval of our 24-25 proposed budget. This will be a final reading, action item 240685.
Is there a second?
And we do questions. Okay.
I'll second it.
Don't all jump, okay.
Okay.
So, Member McCoy, seconded. Any questions?
Yes, I do. I have a question. With the collective bargaining and all the things going on with that, did we, I know we went over the budget over and over again, but is the impact of these contracts, like, have we, are they represented in our budget? Like, was there cushion and stuff for that? And since we don't have the teachers one, is that a, I was just curious because I'm kind of like, I'm not one to.
I appreciate that question. Thank you. What we did was we entered and accounted for kind of a earmarked lump sum dollar figure that would be a reasonable and responsible amount to include in our budget, both to assist with our decision making for next year, but also to be sure that we were not irresponsible by not including anything. So that was our approach. If we were to include a designated dollar sum value, that could be seen as an unfair labor practice. So we want to avoid that, but we also at the same time want to be prudent with our budget and include some earmarked lump sum dollar value that might represent where we might land with those negotiations as an increased cost.
Okay, so
when you hear that term, when we talk about the parameters that we kind of discuss together as a group,
Yeah.
and then we go forward to the table, and you try to, everybody's not going to come out exactly where you intend it, but that is a projection within those parameters. So when we come back to say, if an agreement has landed within the parameters that have been established going forward, and that really is kind of a point that is entered into that initial budget assumption.
okay, so those are what we've seen, those like for instruction and that, those values that were presented with, that allows for that, those
Yes,
figures and everything that has.
Yes, I'm sorry. And
Yeah,
I-
no,
So
it's
the
all right.
net has been accounted for
Mhm.
ultimately.
It won't be precise, but
Right.
it is
Correct.
in
So there was some.
generally where it's
Correct.
at.
Okay, and so
As
and
doc-
do.
As
okay.
Dr. Merritt mentioned, there will be variances, so we will bring those forward in the mid-year amendment and reconcile those variances.
Okay, so we do have like a plan of what things we would have to say, oh, we have to look at this and
Mhm, for
this is
sure.
not working now? Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's, yeah, I mean, I figured that, but I just,
Good question.
to be sure.
Mhm. That's a great
Okay.
question, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed say no. Passes 4-0. Action item 240686, consider approval, resolution for bid package HS4A, Canton High School Innovation Hub Robotics Edition, final reading.
Mr. President, I move that we consider approval of resolution for bid package HS4A, Canton High School Innovation Hub Robotics Edition. This is a final reading, and the action item is 240686.
Is there a second?
A second.
All right. Any questions? All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed say no. All right, on to citizens' comments. We have one citizen's comment, Andrew Pass. Just as a reminder, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Pass.
Thank you. I wanted to introduce myself to the board and cabinet really quickly. My name is Andrew Pass, and I'm the founder of an educational content development company that partners with school districts to develop customized content. And I think that we really take a unique perspective. People here were talking about the fact that students need to see themselves in the content. And for the last 15 years, we've been working as a company with organizations like Pearson and McGraw-Hill, and they sell curriculum on a national scale, but they don't look at each school district as the whole entity that it is, the sacred space that it is. And now my company, which has 2,400 associates, writers, editors, subject matter experts, and the like, are beginning to work directly with school districts, developing that kind of professional content, but targeted at the local entity, because that's what matters, is the local entity. Your community, your students, your parents is what matters. And I just want to say that I go to quite a few school board meetings, and I've read in the literature that more and more boards are inviting students to sit on the board. And this is the first school board meeting that I've been to that has had a student. And I just want to ask a question. If that doesn't demonstrate the great place that you hold students, then what does? Kudos to you.
Thank you. All right. Discussion action item 240687. Consider approval of resolution in support of regional enhancement millage for general election ballot in November. This will be the first and final reading.
Mr. President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution in support of the regional enhancement millage for general election ballot in November. This will be a first and final reading, action item 240687.
Is there a second? All right, that was Member McCoy. Second it. Any questions or discussion?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, this is the regional enhancement millage that has really supported our district. It's one of the few ways that our local community can actually provide local control over the things that go into the district. Everything else is a unified or uniform process that occurs from the state. And we really appreciate the community's support over the last 2 cycles. This will be our second renewal since this was originally passed. And it's really made a big difference for our district. I think it's about, what, $6.5, a little over $6 million that represents the district. There was a change to this process at the last renewal where this was made available to all public schools, so that is traditional public as well as charters in that process. So it did bring some of our numbers down, but it does better support students in the process, and it is really important for the district. This is a very early renewal. So this renewal is coming up on the process to go on to the general election, and so it gives us a chance to allow more people to vote on this, and we're very hopeful that we'll get the community's support in this process. But this is a fairly early renewal, so normally we would not come out on something like this ahead at this time. So, Ms. Merritt, I don't know if you've got some feedback.
Going to share, and that is a great summary. When you look at this, again, this is a Wayne County, so this is not a Plymouth Canton. Out of the 33 districts that would appear on the ballot, over 51% of the boards must take action to support this millage going on the ballot. And so there's a time period in which all 33 districts, such as you, the boards have to consider. If there is support, if we have at least 51, then Wayne County would be able to move forward and put that on the ballot. So that is the process that we're engaging in right now to see, do we as a school board support, given our community, the ability to decide whether or not to support this millage across the county.
So is that 51% of the districts or 51% of the student population?
The districts.
And the 51% has already been met. This is just us adding our voice into that conversation.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the actual approval on the other,
Right.
this is just to say
Put it on the
51,
ballot.
to get it on the ballot, to allow the voters to decide.
No, I was concerned about it because of just, I think many people right now are financially struggling, and I think that we only, when you look at the back end historically, we only receive 63% of the tax revenue that's collected as a district, and I'm not sure the accountability. I mean, right now as a district, I'm concerned that it's early to do that because of just kind of the state of our economy right now. It could improve after election, but since there is time, I just think that to send almost half of our money to disperse it seems kind of where we could maybe come up with other plans to help with other districts in that. I'm concerned about that because a lot of people aren't for adding to their expenses when you figure out how much that is per household.
So in
And-
terms of, that's a great clarifying question. In terms of the millage itself, the millage does not expire until 2027, as you heard. So it's not going to start a new tax or anything early. This is a continuation. It's putting it on the ballot early to decide, so in the event that there's more work around, if it didn't go forward, you'd have multiple elections where you wouldn't have to pay for a special election. But that, the authority or the renewal doesn't expire regardless until the end of 2027. And again, when you look at that, it's not a new tax, it would be the continuation. So if that millage rate were to roll back, we would not be able as a county to leverage more than that three mills. So the
Right.
earliness is not to say that a tax would begin earlier. The millage would still expire as the time that is already agreed upon, and this would allow it to continue.
Yeah.
It's a renewal.
Oh, and it's a renewal, but it's also, I think, identifying that we do only get a return of, we don't get a full return of that, we just get.
Right, but it does
Percent.
supports public students throughout the county. So
Right.
this is.
Unencumbered money.
It's unencumbered money.
Unencumbered.
So this is one of the only chances that we have to be able to raise money with local control. And even if we only get 63% or 63 cents on the dollar as part of this, that is more than $6 million to our district, which is a huge impact for what we do. And the other money that maybe we are a donor district because of the economic well-being of our community, that money is supporting public students throughout the county, and that's a good thing for all of us.
It's good, but except is there accountability on it? It's like just sending money off, like, oh, there's no accountability to it if they can do whatever they want to in the district, so.
Our taxes
just
are
kinda-
always something that you can argue about whether there's accountability or not as part of that
Right, well, I
process.
just think people
And-
work hard in our district. We've already said there's people that are struggling in our district, and I just am concerned about with the economy, the way it's kind of gone down and under a little.
You're welcome to
All
vote
right,
no
next,
for it.
So,
next,
yes, I know. Okay.
additional questions? Josh, anything? Come on, man, you're on a roll tonight.
Nothing right now.
All right, you letting them off easy on this one. I see, okay. All right, all in favor say yes?
Yes.
Any opposed say no?
No.
Passes 3-1.
No.
Wait.
It failed.
Oh, it
It
failed.
failed.
That's
That's
right,
at
it did
four.
fail.
Yeah, we don't have a.
It's the number of members on the board.
That's right, that's right.
Sorry, guys.
All right,
I don't- just
follow-up
looking good.
questions?
I do not believe we had follow-up questions this week. We did have, oh, well, they're all from the last meeting, that's right. So this evening, what was captured as a follow-up?
Member Kehoe?
I think Diane's.
The only one that was clear to me would be adding the resolution to the organizational meeting for the SBA student. So not really a question, but just an action item. And then the rest of the items I captured are around some of the presentation questions and whether that would be addressed in a workshop or not. I don't know if you want individual members to see if that could be addressed or if they want it as an action item.
All right, so real quick, let's go back to that last action item just for clarity. So it did fail, but there's enough support to move forward with putting it on the ballot. It's just that Plymouth Canton schools will be shown on record as a no, correct? Okay, all right, just wanted to clarify that. All right, with that, we will adjourn at 8:53.